Today, ladies and gents, we're going to be doing something a little different, and I will say this up front. This is largely inspired by another YouTuber who goes by the moniker Razorfist. His clear passion for the pulps, their binary morality, and the unique characters and universes crafted by their authors reminded me of an old passion of mine. Men's adventure novels are a pulp genre to themselves, and while I actually dislike most of them due to their often tawdry over-sexualization and terribly boring dialogue, three series in particular have always stood out to me. I'm going to cover all three, at least by way of general introduction and perhaps in depth if these are enjoyed, but in no particular order. But, for the purposes of classifying them, I call them the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. The Bob Lee Swagger series. This series of novels follows the Swagger clan. Arkansas, hill scrabble tough, nerves of steel, eyes like eagles. Superb shots and fighters. Unfortunately, the most famous book from this series is Shooter, which was first made into a terrible film and then into an even worse TV series. Do the right thing, and just read the books instead. The book series itself follows 3 generations of Swagger, maybe 4 now. I actually haven't read the most recent releases. From the elder Swagger assembling a cadre of gunmen, Seven Samurai style, in an effort to free Negroes from an abusive prison in the Deep South, to Bob Lee himself in an advanced age putting down the rifle to learn the way of the blade to take on a Bushido master, to his daughter's NASCAR adventures. This series is legitimately well written and fun. It's the good. The bad. The Wingman series. Wingman is about Patriot and flag-painted F-16 pilot Hawk Hunter. Are we noticing a pattern with the names here? Trying to navigate a World War III nuclear war-torn America, rebuild, and, almost most of all, save his one true love and oft-kidnapped and sometimes pin-up girl, Dominique. All the while working with a band of characters ranging from the Football City Special Forces, ex-football players turned SWAT anti-terrorism task force agents, to Fitzgerald, his hard-drinking Irish transplant buddy, genius electrician and engineer, all teaming up to combat crack-smoking neo-Nazis in the Panama Canal and a Russian secret agent and member of an organization known as The Circle who goes by the name of Lucifer. And of course planning every single mission over beers and whiskey, like proper men. The writing is hilariously over the top, and the Patriot angle is milked for all it's worth. It's corny, but I love it. The bad. The ugly. The Deathland series. I have nothing personally negative to say about this series from prolific author Lawrence James, writing under the pseudonym James Axler. A much more fitting name for someone who would write a series that is essentially about the Fallout universe before the Fallout universe was conceived. This seems to largely go uncredited by the game's makers, but to anyone who has seen both of these side by side, it's fairly apparent. This series picks up about 100 years after the nuclear apocalypse, and essentially, if you're a fan of the Fallout series, you'll love these. It's the ugly here in that it's the ultimate unknown, it's the underdog. But if you've ever enjoyed something like Manos Hands of Fate, or are a fan of passion works and bizarre universes, this series will sweep you away.
Her eyes flicked over at the leaning row of rifles and SMGs, and she picked out a Heckler & Koch 9mm. Good weight, short, a nice death-dealing compactness. She took it up, checked it, went back to the box, and tensely fingered through the jumbled mass of sticks, clattering them aside until she found 2 30-slug curved mags. One she stuffed into a back pocket, the other she held against the gun, while she began cramming the 4th grenade into an already overstuffed pocket over her right breast.
Now, this is just an intro. In having wrote this, I can tell you I'm going to flesh all these out more as I reread these for the umpteenth time in my life. I hope you look forward to it as much as I do, and what follows is the prologue to Wingman, Book 1, to whet your appetite. He knew the airplane was coming. It was an early spring day, the sun was shining, the whole mountain was melting, coming to life again after the long, cold winter. The airplane was still some distance away, but the sound was unmistakable. He closed his eyes and saw it. Small engine, no more than 200 horse. It was a Piper Cub, 10, maybe 15 miles to the southeast. One of the airplane's pistons was misfiring slightly. He waited. For 2 years, 1 month, and 6 days, he had lived on the top of the New Hampshire mountain. The camp, nothing more than a shack with a bed and a wood stove, had belonged to his family years before. He had visited there many times while growing up, so he knew the isolated mountain area well. But 2 years of trapping rabbits, opening cans, and drinking nothing but stream water or melted snow was no life for a fighter pilot. He hadn't seen or talked to a soul in all that time, and until he had heard this airplane approaching, he wasn't sure there was anything flying anywhere. He wasn't even sure if there were any people left. 2 years. A long time to be alone. When he first climbed the mountain, he was convinced it was an escape, the chaos that he envisioned would sweep the country. Did it ever happen? Did America commit national suicide after it lost World War III? Lost, not on the battlefield, but by the actions of a Russian mole who had waited until America and its allies were victorious before he'd shown his true colors? Would he have felt differently if the traitor had been someone other than the vice president? He waited another hour before the airplane came into view. It was at the other end of the valley, flying slowly, being buffeted by the mountain crosswinds. As it flew closer, he saw it towing something, a sign, like they once used to carry advertisements. Even with his extraordinary vision, it was still too far away for him to read. How strange it would be, he thought, if the first plane he had seen since the end of the war was pulling a sign for suntan oil. 2 years. It was a long time to think. That Christmas Eve, he had just arrived at Cape Canaveral to begin pilot training for the space shuttle. It was then that he had heard of the Russian attack on Western Europe. Scud missiles, tens of thousands of them, millions of Europeans dead, not by nuclear holocaust, but by nerve gas. A massive invasion of Western Europe had followed. Then China had been nuked. The free world had struck back. He had been ordered to rejoin his unit, the 16th Tactical Fighter Wing, known in peacetime as the famous Thunderbirds, aerobatic demonstration team. A day later, they'd been in Rota, Spain, bombing up for the first mission against the invading Red Armies. War had broken out all around the world. Any country who'd had a dispute with its neighbor had decided to give it a go now. Great battles raged, the earth was in flame. But nowhere had the horror compared with the battle for Western Europe. There'd been everything from hand-to-hand combat on the ground to killer laser satellites dueling high above in deep space. His squadron had been in the middle, flying above the killing fields, battling anything and everything that the Russians put in the air. For 2 months it had gone on relentlessly, but finally, it had been in the air that the battle had been won. The final push. 2 straight days. 37 straight sorties for him. No sleep, no food. Living only on the adrenaline rush one gets when his country is at stake. It had been the largest air battle ever fought. More than 4,000 aircraft jammed into less than 200 square miles of airspace. It had been incredible. Even the soldiers on the ground stopped fighting to watch. And in the end, it had been the Air Force of the free world, led by the Americans, which won the battle. But America had still lost the war. As the Piper flew even closer, he saw the tow sign's words were made up of letters of different styles and even uneven shapes. It was apparently cut from several types of airborne ad. The thing looked like a flying ransom note. 2 years. It was a long time to spend on theories. When did the vice president decide it was time to turn? Was it after the ceasefire had been agreed to? Or after the armistice had been signed? Or had it been after his henchmen had assassinated the president and his cabinet? No matter. When the battles were over and America wasn't looking, he had turned off the Star Wars defense just long enough for 150 Russian nuclear missiles to obliterate America's MX and Titan ICBMs while they sat in their silos. The surprise attack had blown away most of the country's midsection, along with the nuclear deterrent. Another sneak attack on America. Had it been the only way the enemies of freedom could defeat her? The Piper was now in front of him, slow enough so he could read the sign. Hunter. Report to Otis. Jones. It sounded crazy. Was the message for someone who was out shooting deer and for some reason had to report back to some guy named Otis at the request of Mr. Jones? Who were they? Game wardens? Then, as the plane flew past, it hit him. Could he be the hunter they were looking for? Had he been up on the mountain so long that he didn't even recognize his own name? Otis had to mean Otis Air Force Base out on Cape Cod. And that meant there was only one Jones it could be. General Seth Jones, hero of the European theater. The man the Allies had followed into battle against the Russian Air Force. The man who had almost single-handedly won the war. The man on whose wing he had flown for 2 years in peacetime, with the Thunderbirds. and 2 months in wartime with the 16th. Jones was the man who had nominated him for the space program, the man who had flew with his father in Vietnam, the man who had watched over him since the day his parents' plane crashed, the man who named him his own wingman the very first day he climbed into his F-16. And now Jones wanted him to report to Otis. He was packed and gone by noon. That's it, ladies and gents. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, and look for more of these in the future. I'm going to be doing quite a few of them. I love you all individually and as a collective, and as usual, stay safe, good luck, and goodbye.
Suddenly, a pile of cans of food burst apart in a wild spray of tin, and the sticky erupted out of it. Christie's heart felt as if someone had just kicked it. She sprang back, dropping the grenade. She also dropped the second mag. The sticky came at her like a flying fury, and she had to dance away and flee back to the living area of the barn. Her right hand fumbling at the remaining mag jammed into her back pocket. It wouldn't come out. It somehow gotten entangled with a pocket lip. Christie yanked the mag and it came out, tearing the pocket open at one side.
Shit!